Well, I think we'll get started. I show 7:01 here. Welcome readers to a series of talks on the 2020 Summer Read Selection. Option B, Facing Adversity, Building Resilience, and Finding Joy by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. This powerful, inspiring, and practical book focuses on building resilience and moving forward after life's inevitable setbacks, including the current COVID-19 crisis. A Summer Read is a collaboration of WITF's Transforming Health, WellSpan Health, and over 80 libraries in central Pennsylvania. My name is Ellen Helfrich. I'm from Collinsville Community Library and Gladfelder Memorial Library. My co-facilitator is Suzanne Linebaugh from Arthur Hufnagel Public Library. Allow me to introduce our WellSpan partners tonight: Abby Kramer, BSc, LPN with WellSpan Health, and Dr. Mark Godecker, VP of WellSpan Health and Regional Medical Director. We'll ask that you please place any questions or comments in the chat, and we will answer them in the order received after the presentations. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm Dr. Mark Godecker. Oh, make sure I'm not muted. I'm the Vice President and Regional Medical Director with the WellSpan Medical Group. I've been a practicing family physician at the Thomas Hart Family Practice Center in York for almost 17 years. With me tonight, I have Abby Kramer. She's the Quality Improvement Coordinator with Aligning Forces for Quality. So I want to thank you for inviting me and Abby to share our stories tonight. Tonight we're here to talk about something that we will all or have faced at some point in our life, which is injury and illness and how it may affect us. This year's summer read focused on the book Option B by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. The book starts by telling the story of Sheryl and her life in the aftermath of her husband's death. We often take for granted our health and the health of our family and friends, believing it will always be there. Everyone in the audience has at least one story of a friend, a relative, or oneself losing that precious gift of health due to illness or injury. Tonight, we would like to start by sharing some stories of when illness enters our life. So I first want to share the story of Philly. Philly's been a patient of mine for 14 years. And I want to note first that Philly gave me permission. She actually gave me these pictures and helped me with the story, so it may help others. When I first met Philly in 2006, she had just cut her finger with a butcher knife. She was cooking at home, kind of that's similar to what would happen if I was cooking. She had done this a few days earlier and had come in just to get some stitches out. I didn't see her again for about 18 months. And when she came in that time, I actually diagnosed her with high blood pressure and started her on medicine. What she shared with me at that visit was really, I will always remember this. She said, you know, I've been trying to get pregnant for 7 years, and she was worried about starting medicine. And she had seen a fertility specialist multiple times, so she was worried about that. About 2 months later, I did routine blood work on her. And I remember this day very poignantly because I called her and said, you need to come in, I need to talk to you. And her blood sugar was 258, which was very high. And she came in, I remember her, I was up at the front desk and she came up to the front desk and she was in tears. And I told her that she had diabetes. I brought her back to a room. And she was tearing up. And I said, you know, Philly, what does that mean to you? And she said, you know, I just lost my dad to diabetes. And when I was a child, I saw my uncle lose his leg to diabetes. And it really was something that hit home when I told her that diagnosis. She also was concerned. She was worried that she would never be able to get pregnant. And she had tried and tried and tried. So I started her on a medication, and I reassured her that she could still get pregnant, but I had doubts, just knowing how difficult it can be when you have diabetes, and especially at a later age. After that, we didn't talk much about getting pregnant, and I think Philly realized that it might not happen. I think she really gave up that hope. So if we flash forward for 4 years, Philly was now 37 years old at this time, and she came to my office and she was having a lot of nausea and vomiting. So we checked a pregnancy test and it was positive, which was awesome. And I will always remember that day. And she had tears of joy and tears of disbelief. So we immediately got her in with the pregnancy specialist because she was high risk because of the diabetes and high blood pressure. And on January 4th, 2013, she had a healthy baby girl named Zoe. Not exactly how she thought it would happen, but this was her option B. So let's flash forward another 4 years, and Philly was now 41. And at that point, she was happy. She had Zoe. Everything was great. But she came back into the office again with nausea and vomiting. And we did a pregnancy test, and once again, it was positive. And then on January 22nd, 2018, about 5 years after Zoe's birth, she had a healthy baby boy named Rowan. So Philly has faced the adversity of chronic illness now for 13 years. And I'm not going to say it's been easy for her, because there have been many times it has been a rough ride. But through all the ups and downs, Philly has persevered. And during this wild ride, she has been blessed with 2 beautiful children. So it's not too bad for an option B. Next, I want to introduce you to Jen. Jen is my wife of almost 20 years. And as an aside, she also gave me permission to share her story tonight. The only thing I might be in a little trouble for is that I'm going to share her age. Well, at least her age back a few years ago, but you'll be able to figure this out. And some photos that I selected. She's also a family doctor like me. She works in Hanover. The difference is that she's smarter. She's definitely prettier, and she's a much better cook than I. and she's probably downstairs cooking dinner. We also have 2 sons, Jack and Ben. Their age is 14 and 12 now. So on September 19, 2018, Jen went for a screening mammogram. It had been about 2 years since she had had one, and she received the following letter a few days later. So both of us being physicians, we thought, no big deal. She actually was expecting this. The last time she had a mammogram, she had to go back for more imaging too. So a week later, she went back in for her ultrasound. The radiologist shared these results with her. She'd need a biopsy. So we're thinking, okay, we're a little bit more worried now. But both of us being physicians knew that this does not always mean something bad. 3 days later, she underwent the biopsy, and on October 1st, our worst fears were confirmed. She was diagnosed with breast cancer. So Jen was 45, and she had breast cancer. That night, I remember we sat outside on our deck. We loved doing that in the summer and having dinner. We always have family dinners. And our 2 boys were 12 and 10 at the time. And we told them that Mom had cancer and would need surgery. Ben, my youngest, he was very brave during the whole thing. And then he came over and gave Jen a big hug, and he started to cry and she started to cry. We reassured him it would be okay. On October 12th, the day before Jack's 13th birthday, Jen underwent surgery to have the lump removed. Probably wasn't the best birthday gift, but it happens. She was found to have 1 lymph node that had cancer in it, and she needed radiation and chemotherapy. A month later, on November 15th, Jen saw patients in the morning, because that's just what she does. She keeps going at her office in Hanover, and was to drive to Gettysburg with her friend for her first round of chemotherapy. But Mother Nature did not agree, and we got our only real snowstorm of that year. Option B, get chemo the next day. What's amazing is that this is Jen 6 days later, making Thanksgiving dinner, and that's her mom in the background. And so she hosted her parents, her brother, her brother's family. They have 2 girls that are twins that are my son's age, and we had them all over for Thanksgiving dinner, and she cooked. I helped, I promise. After chemo started, Jen came home from work one day and informed us that her hair was started falling out. And that was one thing that she was really worried about, and she had thought a lot about. So that night we had a hair shaving party, and that was her suggestion. Ben jumped right in. shaved it. He was, I will remember that because he was shaving and he would laugh and then he would cry. And then he would laugh and then he would cry. And then Jack just watched, but he did videotape it. So we have that videotape that we'll always keep. And this is the picture that she knew I was sharing right now. She would be very upset with me. So, but this was after the hair shaving party. On Friday, April 5th, 6 months after her diagnosis, Jen was finally done with all of her radiation and all of her chemotherapy. 3 months later, amazingly enough, she did a 6-day hike to Machu Picchu, climbing as high as to 15,000 feet in elevation. It was no easy task. Believe me, I did not have chemo and radiation and surgery, and I was feeling it. Illness and injury affects all of us at some point in our lives. Option A may no longer be a choice. How we deal with illness and injury defines the course of our lives will take. I'd like to turn it over to Abby, and she's going to share her story now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Godecker. I'm going to share a story with you this evening. And first, I have to thank you for the honor of being involved in the summer read. Option B is an incredible book with lots of great resources. And the transitions and challenges that come out of life are something that affect each and every one of us. So it is a wonderful choice, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you to Dr. Godecker, Suzanne, and Ellen, and Jackie for making this evening a success. Bob Helm had his first encounter with dementia when his mother had been diagnosed. It was something that he supported her through, but quietly shared that he hoped it would never happen to him. In January of 2010, Bob went to see his family doctor and returned with the news that he had the start of dementia. He was very open and shared his diagnosis with his family. We never heard him say, "Why me?" He just continued to put one foot in front of the other each day. Bob was my grandfather, and his option B was to live a full life with dementia. My grandmother shared that in the beginning, he would place his hand on his forehead when he was trying to remember something, and he would say, "I can't remember. I just can't remember." As his dementia progressed, my grandmother Joan began using flashcards and asking questions about him. She would ask, "How many brothers and sisters do you have?" Or, "What did you do for a living?" It was nice for him to be able to reminisce when he would remember. I can still hear his deep belly laugh as he recounted stories of him and his best friend getting into all kinds of trouble when they were growing up. When I was out shopping one day, I found a photo album that had a recording at the bottom. So you could share a story, or you could talk about the photo that was on each page. I gave this to Bob after I filled it with photos of his family. He talked about the photos and we recorded his voice. He would come to look at that album many times, and hearing his own voice when he couldn't remember seemed to comfort him. The challenges came, dementia became more severe. Joan had transitioned from the role of a wife to the role of a caregiver. And she was usually on high alert because at this time, Bob had begun wandering and also dealing with sundowners. It was during this time that she became a part of a support group for caregivers that was held at the Brethren Home in New Oxford. She would attend for 1.5 years until Bob became a resident at the home. Bob also took part in a day program, which allowed him to interact with other people who had the same diagnoses. One morning, very early, Joan heard the front door creak open. She got up out of bed and realized that Bob was not in the house and her purse had been emptied. The car keys were gone, and so was the car. Joan called the police to let them know that her husband and her car were missing. She was terrified that he may have been hurt or lost or scared. As the police were collecting information from Joan, Bob came walking up the driveway to their home. It turned out that Bob had gotten up to do something that he had done for many years: drive to the newsstand and get a morning paper. He parked the car outside the newsstand that he previously went to every day, but he couldn't remember how to get that car out of park to drive it back home. He then walked the 2 miles back and thankfully ended up unharmed. This made the transition of a nursing home something that was necessary for Bob for his safety. Joan shared that when Bob was placed in a long-term care facility, it was sad for the family, but there was also a little bit of relief and some peace because we knew that he would be safe there. Bob spent 2 years in the facility before passing away with his family by his side in January of 2018. As a caregiver, Joan shared that the most valuable things that she did were to contact nursing homes, area offices on aging, and Veterans Affairs. They were able to help her find support during challenging times. And it was also helpful to Joan that her family supported her decisions and the care that she was giving Bob. She said that people would try to show their support for her by saying things like, "I couldn't do this," or "I don't know how you can do this." And sometimes people would say, "This is a big job." She knew that those things came from a place of love, but she said it was difficult to hear them because Bob was her husband and caring for him was an act of love. Bob's option B of a life with dementia is a beautiful story with ups and downs. Savoring each and every new moment in his journey is what made Bob and his family resilient through it all. Thank you for allowing me to share my personal story tonight. And thank you, Dr. Godecker, for sharing yours as well. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Godecker, and we're going to open it up to some suggestions for tips with health, illness, injury, and resilience. And then we'll go to question and answer following that. So if you're having any questions right now, please feel free to put them in the chat box.
So if you have not had a chance to read the book, or if you're part way through, I encourage you, I agree with Abby, a phenomenal book. It really does a great job of sharing stories, and we like to teach through stories. I think people learn much better that way. So we want to talk a little bit about some of the tips that came out of the book for how to build resiliency when you're dealing with illness and injury. So, you know, one of the things that we do as humans is that when we're suffering, we don't always ask for help, right? We say, we want to do this ourselves. We don't want to share our personal stories. We don't want to burden other people. And one of the lessons to learn from all of these things is that you don't have to suffer alone. And it is, people actually embrace that and they want to help you and be there for you. So really simple things like picking up the phone and tell someone that you're in a rough place. Share your story, share what's going on, share how you're feeling and what your challenges are. This will put you a step forward to feeling better and realizing that there are others that are here to help you out. The other thing, and I think Abby highlighted this well, is that the community, there's communities around. And when I say communities, the communities could be multiple different things. And Abby mentioned reaching out to nursing homes and the Area Agency on Aging. These are communities that deal with patients that have dementia and the challenges of older patients that all the time. So, but there are other places that you can go for. And these are, if you can find people that understand and know what you've been through, it really helps. My wife, I'll use an example. She belongs to a physician moms cancer group. And it's all physicians and they're all moms and they've all had cancer or they're going through being just diagnosed with cancer. And it's wonderful. She shares the stories with me. But so look for people who are going through similar experience. You might, nowadays, in-person support groups might not work, but they've switched over to Zoom, but there are some. There is a great online community. It's called Patients Like Me. I know I've used it with several patients that have had some rare diseases, and they were able to find people that they could talk to about their disease. I'm a physician, and I try to tell a patient what to expect, but I haven't been through it. And so when you've been through it, you can much better tell that person what to expect, what are the good, what are the bad, what are the tricks to dealing with the chronic illness or the injury that might happen. And these relationships can be extremely therapeutic. The other thing is we are, as a society, we do very poorly when someone tells us bad news, or we hear bad news. And the reason is we don't know what to say, and we don't want to say the wrong thing. And there is, with this, the first thing is just acknowledge what people are going through. And it is okay to say, you know what, how are you doing? I'm here for you. I know this must be a very difficult time for you. These are simple things, but it allows that person to know that you're opening up to them so they can open up to you. And you're giving them permission to open up. Listen to them, so important. Accept their reaction, whatever it is. It could be anger. It could be, they might not want to talk to you that day, but they might come back and talk to you later. It could be tears. You just don't know what's going to happen, but accept that and realize that where they are could be a pretty dark place for them. You're creating space for them to share. You're making it safe, and that's the important thing, and that's what you want to do. When we have loved ones that are suffering, and friends, family, showing empathy. So empathy it requires you to imagine what another person feels, and then respond in kind to that person's emotion. You're actually feeling it. I've, as I noted, I've been a family doctor now for 20 years. And there are certain times when when I tell someone something, it hurts. It physically, I get a pain because I know how, when I'm telling them a diagnosis like diabetes or cancer, that I know what they're going to go through just from dealing with it with other patients. You want to validate their pain. You're there to support them, reassure them of that. Hugs, the hug I told you about from my son, I think that he gave to his mom, that probably did more for her that day than anything else. Phone calls. We often will avoid things because we say, oh, we're going to say the wrong thing, so we're just not going to say anything at all. You'll never say the wrong thing. Caregivers too. It's when the person going through this, all the people around them also need help and might be going through a difficult time. Don't pretend to understand what they're going through. Just tell them that you're there for them and you want to help. And then help. Look for ways. Be forgiving. As I noted, people can be angry. People can be irritable. People can be quiet when they're not normally. They might not laugh at things because they're just in another place. They might be distracted. If they want to reminisce about happier times, that is wonderful. Especially for their caring for them to join in. Find photos like Abby was sharing the story. Tell favorite stories. It's okay to think back, smile, cry about mom's famous practical jokes or their son's first words. It is, the other thing I will share with this is that and when you have young kids like we dealt with, it is okay to share with them and try to explain to them what's going on and let them know. I would encourage you not to keep secrets from them. Kids are smart. They will figure it out. The other things is, do things for people. right? Step in as the caregiver. I think dementia is a great example. I had a patient came in today, and she cared for her husband a long time ago. This was probably 14 or 15 years ago, and he had dementia, and she cared for him at home. And we used to look for, I'd call her friends and family and say, hey, can you go over and give her a break? And they'd go over, give her a break, and she'd go out with her daughter and get something to eat, or her sister. So really try to take advantage of that. Cooking can be therapeutic for some people, and it can be torture for others. So if you can help them make a meal, or go ahead and even better, prepare it elsewhere, bring it over, do the dishes before you leave. So leave things better than when you came in. So. Abby, I'll share. Do you have any comments or anything that you wanted to add?
I don't think so. We're gonna go ahead and let Ellen and Suzanne open with question and answer. So if there's anything that you would like to know a little more about.
Thanks, Abby. Rick and Crystal want to know, what are the right things to say?
I don't know that there is a right thing. I think the biggest takeaways that I got from this, and I'll have let Dr. Godecker follow up as well. What his response is definitely to be empathetic, to be willing to listen, and that sometimes is difficult. Just to let people know I am here, and that silence is not a bad thing. Sometimes people just need that person with them who is willing to listen and be willing to let that silence go. It's hard when you first experience that, but sometimes that's all that someone needs.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I agree. When I was going through this, and granted, I did not have breast cancer, my wife did, but it was emotional time, and one of my family, my other family, I have a work family, but I have patients who are family, and there are certain patients that I needed to tell, I had to tell, and it made me feel better by expressing that to them. And then, what I really will always remember, and I just had somebody come in the other day and they said, how's your wife doing? And that they are dealing with horrible, awful things in their life, but they're asking me about my wife and how she's doing 2 years later is just, it means, I can't express how much it means to me. So yeah, I don't think there is a wrong thing to say.
I wonder, as medical professionals, here's one thing that I would think would be a wrong thing to say. Oh yeah, my cousin died from that. Oh yeah, my uncle suffered horribly. Those kind of things. I've been a caregiver for numerous people, and I find that, I don't necessarily want to hear the stories that don't have happy endings, even though I know mine may not. Medically, what's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, Ellen, there are some things, and that's, you bring up a good point. One of the things that I always am mindful of when I'm talking to patients, so if I have a patient that has diabetes, I don't say, I know what you're going through, because I don't have diabetes, and I acknowledge that. But I will acknowledge that I've had many patients, and I've seen what they've gone through and the pain and what they've had to deal with. Yeah, so I think that is important. There are stories that you can share that will help patients, but I think asking permission with that, and never assume that you know what they're thinking or what they're feeling. So I think a lot of it is asking them that question to start. So where are they in this whole process? Are they in a good place? Are they in a bad place? And then use that to guide the conversation. The worst thing that you can say is to say nothing. And I think that is, I think that's probably the biggest take home and when you read the book and just overall when you look at things.
I was quite moved by and tempted to look at the same time as listening to Abby to find one of those photo albums with the voice recording. What a wonderful treasure. What a great way to help family and the patient cope.
We did find as he went through the transitions of dementia that we were relying a lot on images that had him in them, more so than showing him a picture of his family with him not being there.
Mm-hmm.
He could see his face. That was more helpful to him. But later on, having heard himself really helped, because dementia is a scary thing, especially if you're that person who is looking at these pictures and seeing yourself and having no recollection of who anyone is. But hearing that voice, even though he may not have at some points realized that it was him, he recognized it was a familiar voice and it was someone that he knew and trusted. So that helped him later on.
Thank you. Susan shares in the chat that her husband had ALS, and knowing that his coworkers helped him to continue to work and allowed him to feel useful because his brain was working, his body just wasn't, and that it allowed his family to feel somewhat normal. And so I think that sometimes coworkers underestimate their ability to do things that are supportive of not just the patient, but their family. Thanks for sharing that, Susan.
I think along with that, being empathetic is that we sometimes take for granted, or we think that we're helping in taking over something or doing something for someone, especially in a disease process where they're starting to lose things that they used to be able to do. Sometimes letting them take a little bit longer to put their socks on, or to have to think a little bit about how things work and how to get dressed is okay, because they still can do that, and you want to support them in that moment, as you know, them being able and being successful at doing that skill instead of taking that moment from them. Just be their cheerleader and help them through it. It may not be the same way it always was, but that's your option B of getting dressed in the morning. Things will continue to change.
I'd encourage anyone else that's listening that has a question or something to put it in the chat. Until then, I will say that as a caregiver, I have found that there is value in having friends that will just let me vent. And there's also great value in having friends that will call me on saying, well, you know what, you're frustrated, but how do you think he feels? How about that? So, you know, you don't want to find just pure sympathetic people that will let you gripe. You do want to find some honest, close friends in there that will, you know, pull you back a little to center and say, you know, you don't even have this disease, and look at how you're complaining. So I think that having a good mix of support group, whether it's, you know, a real effective labeled support group or just your friends and sometimes your unwitting coworkers that have to listen to it.
One of the things that Sheryl Sandberg talks about in the book is appreciating when people would just take initiative and do something kind and caring for her. We talked in one of our meetings about a friend who called and said, what do you want on your hamburger? He didn't say, do you want me to bring you something? Is there anything I can do? And Joan Didion talks about this in her book about widowhood, A Year of Magical Thinking. She said, when someone's especially in the early stages of coping with loss or serious illness or new diagnosis, don't ask them what they want, because they might be so stunned and at a loss that they don't know what they need. And a simple gesture like bringing somebody a cup of tea can just be so comforting and caring, and that can help them, you know, get through an afternoon. So that really hit home with me when I read Sheryl Sandberg talking about that sometimes we feel like we don't want to bother people, But, you know, sometimes a really simple act of care and concern can be just what they need.
Yeah, the statement, just do something, I think kind of encompasses that. Yes, I enjoyed that story. Actually, somebody that I work with, her husband just had an accident, and I took that lesson and I used it. And I was going to say, I was going to bring dinner over, and then I thought, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to ask what they want. I'll figure it out. I'm not going to, because at that point, she's not going to want to make decisions. and that works well, and I know people appreciate it.
Thank you, Doctor. We have a couple more comments. One says, knowing that someone just cared was a good healing force, knowing that you're not alone. And sometimes it could be a complete stranger that you just happen to see that you know is struggling. And sometimes it's someone that you know all the details about, but kindness goes a long way. And Karen shares that she tried to give her father, who had macular degeneration, different jobs or things to help her with. I think in the father-daughter role, no matter the ages of that, no matter the capabilities, daddies always want to be able to help their little girls. Karen, that's a good idea, to help him feel more dependent or independent still. Susan's sharing that she found great value in just being grateful about everything, the simple things, counting your blessings. Good. Clean sheets, a shower, clean undershirts. Yeah. You gotta find the things to be grateful for. Karen's, one of his job was putting stamps on them, and they had to be just good enough, and that was how it was. That was the option B of stamps, right, Karen? If you have not finished the book, I don't think we gave you any spoilers here. I'd encourage you to finish it. If you haven't read it yet, hopefully we've shared our enthusiasm for it, and we'll encourage you to do so. It is available on audio. I have a fairly long commute to one of my libraries, and it was a good book, and it was just 5 discs, so it went pretty quickly. And Karen, let me see, Rick and Crystal, you're welcome. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully you'll be able to join us in some of the other events. Does anybody have any other things to share, questions or comments?
Okay, I think we're about done. We want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. We appreciate your participation, your questions and comments in the chat. And we also want to give a big thank you to Dr. Godecker and to Abby Kramer from WellSpan for sharing their professional expertise and their personal stories and insights with us. You guys have been wonderful, and we do really appreciate it. We are excited to let you know that Transforming Health has arranged for a live online author visit with Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. So save the date. That's going to be Tuesday, September 29th. And they're going to have a bi-coastal conversation. Sheryl will be in California and Adam will be in New York, and they'll be live in a video conference that we can all join, and they'll be discussing their book Option B. So that's something to look forward to. In the meantime, please consider filling out a survey about a summer read. You can find paper copies of the survey at your local library. It's also available online at transforminghealth.org. And when you fill out the survey, you can enter to win an autographed copy of the book and to receive a VIP invitation to the live author event. We would like to encourage you to join our next discussion, which is Thursday, August the 13th at 7 p.m. We're going to be discussing another topic that Sheryl and Adam address in the book, becoming resilient and raising resilient kids. And that discussion is going to be co-hosted by YCL librarians Karen Hostetter and Susan Nensteel. So you can go to the library's events calendar and RSVP, and just like tonight, you'll get a Zoom invitation to join us in that discussion as well. Until then, we hope everybody stays safe and stays connected with your library, and we wish everybody a lovely evening. Thank you. Good night.